Welcome everyone to Spirit Coffee Talk. We are so excited to be here today with our guest, Cindy Lang. She is an Akashic record reader, amongst many other talented things. She's just an all-around amazing person, starseed, light worker, you name it, funny, caring, and a wealth of information. So to have Cindy here today to talk about some amazing things going on in the energies and explain them from a perspective from the Akashic records is an amazing gift. And I know I can say on behalf of the three of us at SCT that we are so looking forward to sharing all this information with you all. So Cindy, thank you so much for joining.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm always excited and happy to sit with you girls. You're my favorites.
Amazing. So to start off, just to give people, if they're connecting with us all for the first time, what's a little bit of your history? How did you get into the Akashic records in the first place?
Well, the Akashic records for me was something that I had learned about actually from my grandmother. My grandmother, she was kind of an old hippie, and she always was doing yoga and reading different kinds of books. And she did a lot of automatic writing. My grandfather had passed away, and so did one of my uncles, and she would always do automatic writing. And everybody in our family sort of thought she was a little bit cuckoo, but I was really into it. So she taught me how to do that when I was 8 years old. And I didn't really practice it. I mean, I was little, but I came back to it later on. She passed away when I was 19, she passed away. And we were all allowed to kind of like go through her house and pick a few things that we wanted. And in her basement, I found a box of Edgar Cayce books. And so when I started looking through the books that she had, it gained my curiosity again. But I still didn't really get into the Akashic records, but I started doing a lot of automatic writing because I had remembered that she had told me that I could do that, and I was using it to communicate with her. And then many years later, I did start a healing practice where I practiced energy work and massage therapy. But I was in a car accident where I had had a near-death experience. I've talked about this before. And I was really struggling in my healing, coming back to myself. And I kept feeling like I needed an Akashic record reading, even though I really wasn't clear on what that was. It just sort of kept popping back into my mind. And I did a little bit of research, and I had had a couple of readings with a couple of different people, but it didn't really land with me. But I just was trusting that the universe would guide me to where I was meant to be. And I was at an appointment one day, and I picked up, I don't know if you have them in BC, but in Alberta, we have the Mosaic magazine. And it's like a little spiritual magazine where people advertise. And I picked that magazine up, and there was an article in there from Holly Marwood, and that she was coming to Edmonton from California, and she was teaching classes. And so I took the class for my own personal healing. I wasn't really planning on using it to help other people. I just knew that I needed something that was going to help bring me back to myself. And when I took that class, I absolutely loved it. And I ended up doing a whole series of trainings with her. And when I started working again, I just added that into one of my offerings. So I've been doing Akashic record readings since 2014, and I haven't stopped.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So real quick recap. What are you doing when you're going into the Akashic records? Like, what are the records for those that have no idea? And what do you do in there?
Yeah. So the Akashic records, everybody and actually everything has an Akashic record. So every person has an Akashic record, your animals have an Akashic record, your house has an Akashic record, your business has an Akashic record. Basically, everything has an Akashic record. Well, but when you think about it in terms of the human record, is that it's a field of energy that is constantly recording all of the information of your soul. So it's sort of like Google. You can Google anything in there. So before you decided to incarnate on the earth, you had a team of light beings that decided that they would be the ones that would help you on your journey, because like living on earth is hard. It is a school. We're coming here to learn lessons. And so these light beings decided that they would be there with you from your very first lifetime to your very last lifetime. and they're going to know every single thing that there is to know about you, so that they can help you to evolve and to grow and to learn in this school. Then you also have what we call teachers within the Akashic record, which are lesson based. So you'll have certain ascended masters or our archangels maybe that will come in that will help you to learn a specific lesson. And when you learn that lesson, they'll move on and they'll help somebody else. And then you also have loved ones that are connected to you per lifetime only. So they might be grandparents or pets you might have had, pardon me, or people that you would just know. So they create this great big team within your Akashic record. And so if I'm giving somebody a reading, I use a prayer or an invocation in order to gain access into the Akashic record. Now, you don't have to do it that way. Lots of people will just tap into it. Some people you will go and do like hypnotherapy. Some people will just do a meditation. I use the prayer because I like to add in the person's full name so that I know that I'm setting the intention that this is where we are and we're in the timeline of the person as they are currently. That's why we use the full current name. And so once I'm in there, I can gain access by asking your Akashic record anything that you want to know. So people come in with specific questions or a situation in their life that they want to know about. I can't go in there and just ask what should they know, because they usually tell me it's none of my business. So if people are repeating a pattern, which most people do, they'll have situations in their life where maybe they can't find forgiveness for something, or maybe they have an abundance block, or maybe they have a block in not being able to speak their truth. Whatever that might be, I go in and I try to find the root of it. So typically it's going to be rooted in a past life karma, it's going to be an ancestral karma, or it's going to be something from childhood. So once I find the root of that, typically in a session, I'll do some sort of a guided meditation or a guided session where we'll go back and reclaim the power that was lost in the moment that they decided to create a pattern that is now detrimental to them. So for instance, we always create a pattern because it's our soul's best idea in order to keep us safe. So if you were, say, maybe a spiritual person in a past life, and you knew you were going to get persecuted for that, you might make a vow of silence. Because if you're silent, then you're not going to be able to be harmed, or it's going to protect you in some sort of way. So when that was made, that was the soul's best idea. But now, lifetimes later, that greatest strength has now become a weakness. So we go in and we visit that version that made that vow, and then we recreate a new one. We basically break free from that. We reclaim the soul fragment from that moment. And then we recreate a new pattern for the future.
That makes so much sense, because I remember a year ago, I think it was a year ago, you and I did a session and we got back to a root origin of a karmic connection, which was made even before Earth was fully formed. Yes. And I was like, what? And you're like, yeah, that's where this started. And we changed that vow and shifted it. And since then, that whole energetic link has been completely different. So I can absolutely vouch for what you're saying, because I've experienced it myself. And I honestly would have never known had we not gone in and you had been able to facilitate that. So like, yes, I agree. I agree big time.
Amazing. And one thing that I would like to add on to that, because not all of the patterns we create are linked to vows, but in this case, one thing that I notice is that people will energetically sort of know they have a connection or a vow with somebody, but as long as you get the lesson, that's all that's needed to break that karma. But what happens, I find, is that we're so busy trying to save the other person or wake the other person up so the other person gets it. But that's not necessary. If you show up for your end of the lesson and you learn your lesson, you can still break that vow and move on. And that person will have somebody else lined up or a different situation lined up for themselves. because you've already set that up on both ends, as many experiences as you will need in order to learn that lesson. So that's why we find ourselves in repeat relationships, or jobs, even like you're maybe not being valued at your job, so you quit and you go get another job, and you're like, holy, I feel like I'm in the same situation all over again. And that's why. It's because you'll set it up for yourself for 25 lifetimes if that's what it takes.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
it's pretty
Amazing.
amazing.
Yeah. Any comments, ladies?
Yeah, sorry, I'm keeping myself muted because I don't want to be coughing in everybody's ear. But Cindy, you said something interesting about it's not required for us to have the other person or like help the other person to learn. And I think it's also important for us to remember it's not within our control.
Mhm.
And I feel like for a lot of people that I work with, that's often a common thing, is like, maybe I can help, maybe I have wisdom or knowledge or lessons that I can share with someone. But that's not necessarily within my control, and it's their own karmas and their own choices and experiences and journeys and cycles that they get to choose, right? That's the beauty and sometimes the challenge of free will in relationship with others, is they get to choose when they want to learn those lessons, and that's not always on the timeline that we're on or that we wish to be on.
Exactly. So it's like we are there to help them because we have a contract with them, but you can only lead a horse to water. If they're not going to drink, then you don't need to keep staying there, because now you're just creating a new karma. Yeah.
Totally. That's amazing. So, question with that, what are you noticing now, kind of in the general sense of, let me reframe this. So, we're going through so many changes on Earth, as we all know, from many different perspectives, spiritually, economically, socially, all of that. What have you noticed in sessions has been a common theme for you that's coming up?
So there are a couple of things. One would be that vow. People seem to really, it's almost like being put in a pressure cooker. I've noticed a lot of themes in terms of, it's like in tarot, the Tower card, their lives completely breaking down. And it's not even in one area. It's either seems to be with physical health, or relationships, or abundance. Those are kind of like three things that are coming up, and they all seem to be linked to vows. So vows that we've made in past lifetimes, or even like these galactic vows that we may have made, to be a servant of some sort. And I think many people that would be listening to this have that very strong empathetic energy to them. We all want to help people. We all want the world to be better. We've made vows as light workers to be here on the planet right now to help raise the vibration of humanity, which is great. But when you're at the breaking point where you're in complete burnout because you're constantly giving your energy and sacrificing yourself, then that's not serving anybody. And so that is one of the things that I've noticed, is people coming with this completely empty vessel, and we're going back in and finding, where did they make these vows? Where did they decide to do this? And then once that's cleared up, and actually inviting that soul fragment or that version of you that you left behind back into your heart, is a game changer, because then you're moving forward with a full cup. So one thing that I would say, for instance, that might explain what I'm talking about better, is a lot of people who are very empathetic have become people pleasers. So when you're a young child, if you are an empath and you're always feeling the energy of everybody around you, especially your immediate family, so your parents, you will learn how to become a people pleaser, because that's how you can survive in your environment. So if I give in and mom and dad are happy, then I don't need to feel their anger. If I give in and I just make all my school friends happy, or my grandma and grandpa, whoever that is, you will do everything in your power you can to just be the best person that you can be, so everybody around you is happy, so you don't have to feel their emotions. Which is great, because you wouldn't have survived your childhood if that was the case. But now what's happening is these people are trying to save everybody. And I've been there too, just trying to save everybody to the point of being physically ill. And so we'll go back into a guided experience where they talk to that little version of them, that inner child. And you tell them that they're safe and that it's okay. And you answer any questions that they might have for you. And then you invite them back into your heart. Because what happens every time that we abandon ourselves, whether it's this lifetime or another, we lose a little soul fragment. So you say yes when you want to say no, you lose a little fragment. You don't say anything when you want to stand up for yourself, you lose a fragment. You've maybe had a trauma of some kind. Maybe you've been burned at the stake. You lose a fragment of yourself. And then what happens is you're trying to move forward in life, but you're starting to feel resentful and tired and angry and burnt out because you don't have anything to give, because you're only functioning from like a quarter or even half full. And so when you start to pull back your soul fragments and you regain your power from these lifetimes or these past experiences, you're then moving forward with a full cup, which makes it a lot easier to be vulnerable. Because the reason we don't want to be vulnerable now is because if you're vulnerable and it doesn't work out the way that you want it to, you don't have anything left to lose. So if I abandon myself again, what's going to happen to me? So when you are full and you know how to regain your pieces, so if you say yes when you want to say no, you're going to have the awareness of what to do now about that. It's a lot easier to live your life from a state of vulnerability and in your creative power, because you're coming from a state of being sovereign and solid and grounded and completely embodied in who you are.
And that makes
and so I feel like collectively we are regaining that. Each person is regaining that in their own way, because everybody has their own story of how they got there.
Yeah, I've been seeing that in sessions too. People kind of, not that that's a super easy road either. It's not just like, I want to go in and I want to fix this and there it is and I got my power back. But with kind of being dragged through the mud to get there, people are though gaining their power back, right? Like they are actually returning with the fruits of their endeavors, right? It's not all for nothing. And so I think that's really interesting that this is happening on kind of a collective scale, that you're noticing like these karmic clearings in the records. And so I think it gives people so much power to know that they can consciously ask to go into that and do that. So my question would be, what sort of things should people look out for if they are like, I don't know if this is what's happening to me? What would you say would be some key things that people would notice in their lives if they're ready to release vows?
If they seem to have some sort of binding connection to somebody. So if in your mind you're like, no, the next person or the next time this person asks me this thing, I'm going to say no. And then they ask you, and then you find yourself doing that very thing. Well, there's a good chance that if you intellectually know that you don't want to be doing that, but your emotional body keeps bringing you back to that same pattern, there's probably a vow there. If you find yourself leaving toxic situations, so maybe you've decided you're going to break up with some of your toxic friends, or you're going to leave a toxic work environment, and then you get a new thing and you're excited about it, and then 3 months later, here you are in the same pattern, chances are you've got a vow. If you are always working and working and working, but somehow you just never seem to have any money, like maybe you just start to get ahead and then your car breaks down, or your hot water tank needs to be fixed, or something along those lines, there's a chance there that you've got something going on there in terms of your abundance.
And so if we take that abundance one, for example, could that be like, could a hypothetical situation be that somebody in a lifetime felt so guilty of their opulence, like say they couldn't stand the sight of people being poor or they're being slaves wherever they were, that they made a vow of, I will never be up here again, kind of thing? Like, is it that
Yeah,
simple?
it can be. Like, for one instance, it could be that in a lot of lifetimes, um, and it's everywhere in the world really, where the rich people have been up here and the poor people have been down here. And so if your view of rich people is that they're greedy, they're mean, they aren't fair, whatever that might be, then you may vow that you never want to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might have been somebody who had a lot of abundance and people were always taking advantage of you.
Right.
And so it's better to not have, because then nobody has anything to take. Another one that is really prominent in our area, like I live in Alberta, but I think pretty much everywhere in Canada, is that most people have immigrated from somewhere with nothing. So they've perhaps had to given up their riches, hopped on a boat or whatever that might have been, came here and had to build a life out of hard work and basically completely ignoring any needs that their body might have had. And they needed to do that in order to survive, because if they didn't get out there and till the land, they wouldn't have been able to eat. If they didn't build their house, they would have froze to death in the winter. And they would have done that over and over and over again and probably not really gotten very far. So it might not necessarily be a vow, but it might be an ancestral pattern of we work and work and work, and we're not allowed to rest, and we're not allowed to take care of ourselves, because that means we won't survive. And so now we have a lot of workaholic tendencies. People are constantly working and working and working, but they don't really have anything to show for it.
Yeah.
And so when you recognize that you're just holding an ancestral energy that doesn't necessarily that isn't true anymore, actually, it's just not true anymore, then you can clear that energy, and then you can be more in alignment with allowing yourself to be abundant.
Mm-hmm.
I love what you're saying because, well, for two different things are coming to mind. One, I feel like everything that you're talking about, especially those kind of three common themes that you're seeing right now, um, there's this real reflection of like individual, collective journeys. And a lot of people, my clients that I'm talking to, it's the same sorts of threads. Um, and then we're also seeing it play out on a collective scale, right? Like
Yeah.
like relationships with others and healthcare and
Mhm.
equality and just all of these things, right? The way that financial structures are, like there's so much happening in the world everywhere, and it really kind of ties into a lot of these same things. So for me, that kind of gives me, when I'm deep in my own like, what's going on, and that talking of like a really empty cup, being able, for me, I really find there's strength in community and knowing that like
Mhm.
oftentimes when we're in these deep struggles, and the cup feels so empty, you're so deep in your empty cup that you can't see around and be like, oh, there's actually a lot of other people going through these similar things, and
Mhm.
I'm not alone in my experience, which I think can just help to refill that cup a little bit and kind of find the resolve to be like, okay, keep going, next step, to then the point where you can take a pause and be like, oh my gosh, look how far I've come, look at all that I've gone through, another day, I've gone through these things, even though it felt like in that moment I didn't know how, what
Mhm.
I was going to do that, or what I was going to do, um or just how to get out of it, how to heal, how to move forward. So I really love, as much as it's really hard that it's individual and collective right now, and that has its own set of challenges. I think it's also, if we're all going to be going through this individually, at least as a collective, we can find that strength in community and connection with others. Because what else
Mhm.
is there if we're not connected to others?
Mm-hmm. I would imagine too that all of this is then leading to a much bigger ascension jump, right? Or maybe
Mhm.
this is exactly what the ascension jump is, not that it's even leading to it. Maybe this is actually like we're in the air, right? We've already
Mhm.
jumped. And so all these karmic things are clearing and awarenesses are coming into our consciousness for us to really choose what we want to do about it.
Yeah, and that's the truth, the way that I see it, because I feel like in the fourth dimension, so obviously we're in the third, and you've talked about this a lot, Jeanette, we have to go through the fourth in order to get into the fifth. And the fourth is where the duality is. So it's where you recognize the difference between being full and being empty, the difference between being free or feeling bound. And what I'm noticing is really cool is that once you get through that portion where you're clearing away what no longer serves you and you're calling yourself back home, then it feels like a clean slate. And it's like, what do you want to create now? Because you've done the work of the things that you were karmically here to learn. You've learned the bulk of the lessons. Not that we're not ever going to have lessons again in the 5D. We certainly are. But I feel like like they're not so hard. They're not so shattering. They're not so tough to break through. And then you really, and I've noticed it with myself and a lot of people, it's like now you're in alignment with the things that are meant to enhance your life and to give you room to step into your gifts so that you're able to help all those other people that are still struggling. It's like when you're on the other side of it, you have a whole different perspective of what other people are going through, and you can say, you know what, it's going to be okay. I can tell you that it's going to be okay because I already did this in a different way than you, but I've done it. And it's an opening and a chance to create a new reality collectively. And I think that's why a lot of our old systems are breaking down. It's like they're just not serving anymore.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So it's like a full rewriting in so many ways, and how we rewrite our individual journey, like always we say, has an effect on the collective journey. So that makes sense. How about you, Lisa? What have you noticed lately?
Well, to be honest, this whole session I've been having a really difficult time staying in my body. They keep trying to bring me out, and I keep like getting faced with this whole like understanding how this applies to like my Akashic records, and I keep getting pulled there. To be honest, I'm really trying hard to like stay here. So that's my issue. But I've been loving what you've been saying, and I feel like it obviously resonates very deeply with me right now, and I'm just taking it all in, to be honest.
Powerful.
Do you see when you do Akashic records for people, do you see when they are clearing out things that are personally, and then do you see it differently when it's involved in a collective agreement versus just an individual? Like, does it show up differently?
Not really. It kind of looks the same to me. Although I will say that sometimes when I'm doing like a guided experience, we'll just be guided to a moment in time that would be an earthly incarnation. But there has been a lot of times lately, and it's only been in the last year or so, so it's very new for me, where people are actually tapping into galactic contracts. So going back up to the high councils, to the karmic council, or maybe even recognizing where they made a vow to even come to earth in the first place. So sometimes that imaging will look a lot different for me because it's obviously it's not earth.
Yeah. Do you think that's the reason for that is because of how quickly Earth's ascension is going and how we're moving in such a capacity into this like higher frequency and this higher dimension that Earth is going?
Yes. And I think too that the information I've been getting anyways is that we on Earth were not necessarily evolving as quickly as we could have. And so we've had some galactic help. There's a galactic high council that's come in to help us basically. And so I think that's why part and parcel of why that's all coming through now as well. It seems since the solstice on 2021, December 21st, the winter solstice, that's when things started to really get, I don't know, higher, a higher frequency where I started talking more to those higher beings than I ever have before.
Right.
I have a question. Do you have any insights, or have you been shown when we may reach a point, not of perfection and utopia, but like if we take that same imagery of being in the leap right? So we're not just at the beginning, we're in the leap of when we might land in that new territory. Like, is that a 2026, 2028? Do you have
Kind of like
any
this
ideas?
new earth frequency, right? Like the new earth that you're
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah, like when it
Next month.
lands more.
Soon, next month.
Right.
Next month.
Yeah. No kidding. It'll be April 15th.
Yeah.
No, what I've been told is that we're already halfway there, but it really just depends on the free will of everybody.
Yeah. Makes sense.
It really just depends on the free will of everybody. But the way that I see it is that we can live collectively on the earth, and each individual can be in their own frequency, because that frequency is your perception. So it's like you can have an event that happens and two people watching it, and one person will have a totally different view than the other person.
Yeah.
And so if you're living from a 3rd-D perspective, it's going to look awful, and it's going to be tragic, or it's going to be horrible. It's going to come from a place of lack, that sort of negative energy. But if you're living from a 5th-D perspective, you can look at that exact same thing and feel like a sense of peace around it, a sense of freedom around it, a sense of understanding of why that thing is going on.
Right.
And I think that the whole COVID experience gave us a really good indication of that, because everybody's perspective was different. And one is not better than the other. It's not one is better than the other. It's not like, oh, well, 3D people are not getting it and the 50 people are. It's just that we're in different grades in school, kind of how I see it. It's like some people are in grade 3, some people are in grade 4, some people are in grade 5, some people have graduated college already. But we can all be in the same school at the same time.
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful analogy. I really like that. I really, really like
Yeah.
that. It is inclusive, but it's also honoring the individual level, because you don't want to force someone in grade 3 to try and understand grade 12 algebra. It's useless, right?
It's useless.
So why not meet people where they're at? And I think that's maybe what the universe is doing then. They're like, all right, if your perspective is 3.8, so you're like cusping on stepping into 4th dimension, then those are the experiences you're going to have. That's a great example.
And one thing that I really feel is important to say is that it seems to be one thing that I have been noticing, not necessarily with the people that I know, but I see it on social media a lot, is there seems to be this shame between like the people who feel like they're woke and the people that are not woke. And it's like, no, when has shaming somebody into evolution ever worked? We have to be compassionate and kind and understanding and hold that frequency, so that that higher frequency becomes the collective energy that is able to help other people rise up.
That's right. Yeah.
I agree.
And I think that we're moving through a lot of those emotions in so many different ways and in so many different situations. And that doesn't mean that if you're angry, you shouldn't feel angry. We should always feel all of our emotions, but we shouldn't direct them at other people, which is kind of a basic thing to say. But for some reason, it seems like not everybody is sort of following that rule, that golden rule of be kind.
Yeah.
Because when they're in the heart of it, it's those people that are reflecting it back to them, right? And so that's what's really hard, is when somebody else is holding up this mirror and you're like, damn it, gosh, I hate that. And so then they'll deflect it onto them. But I think we've all experienced that, right? We've all been through it. But the more that we can settle into the feeling of riding a certain vibration in whichever we're at, and just get used to that, instead of like constantly trying to look under the surface, trying to constantly look at what's going down and under there, and just be like, whatever, just like ride your wave, and then you do, like Jeanette, we were talking about that, you kind of become less affected.
Yeah.
One of the things that was just coming in for me as you guys were talking was we've talked a lot about like keep asking for what you want. Sorry, I have holes in my mouth, so I'm almost spit it out. The just batting 100 over here. This idea of like keep asking for what you want, keep asking for what you want. And I know for me, a friend of mine, Jess, she's a wonderful healer and intuitive as well. And I was, I'm feeling, and Cindy, I'm thinking I need to have a little session with you to clear out some
Yeah,
contracts or some things. 'Cause I'm like, check, health, yep. But there's these things that have been coming up and that have just been really challenging to work through. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do this. Oh, 11, to support my health and do these things, and then I kind of get like hit with something else, and this nasty cold, and then it's like, oh, that takes you out. And it's been with other things going on as well, it's been really weighing on my human brain. And I talk a lot here about the balance of like our mind, body, and our spirit. And there's so much psychology, and there's so much somatic stuff, and there's so much spirit stuff that all just plays into our experience at any given time. And what was coming up for me, well, my friend Jess had said, in this one situations that I'm having right now, it's often the saying is one step forward, two steps backwards, right? Like we're moving forward, but overall moving backwards. Whereas she had said, two steps backwards, a million steps forward. And I feel like in these moments that a lot of us are experiencing individually and collectively, we're in these two steps backwards moments and thinking that's just the way we're going. It's just that's going to continue to go backwards. And that's really challenging for our brains, especially when we're people that are working to heal and working to have that self-awareness and working to have that, growth and ascension and, conscious evolution and all this great stuff. And what Spirit was just saying was that this is why, though, we have to keep coming back to asking for what we want, because relating it back to my experience right now, like I've been kind of in a bit of a slog mentally, and I've been having a really hard time accessing what it is that I want because I feel bleh. And it's this reminder that sometimes when we talk about manifestation, it's you just hold this intention and then you let it go and let it come to you and don't even think about it. But that's really changed in the languaging of keep asking for what you want, keep asking for what you want. And I feel like it's because we do get into these two-step back situations, and then our brain freaks out and we have these moments where we're like, and then we start to think, am I creating more of this? Is this my fault? Am I doing this? But it's that reminder of like, things are happening and moving so fast right now. If you have a week where you're in the dumps and you're sad and grumpy and you're having, thoughts about, oh, it's always going to be like this, I'm always going to be sick, I'm always going to you're not impacting it or solidifying it into your experience like maybe we were in past when timelines were just kind of, chunking along on their own trajectory. We're jumping so quickly that like your thoughts from yesterday probably don't really apply to the timeline that you're in today. So ask again. Oh, do you feel a little bit better? I feel a little bit less sick today. Okay, great. I'm well, I am healthy. I can start to access some of those healing energies, whereas like 2 days ago, not a chance. And so it's that like keep asking for what you want day in and day out, because no trajectory is set right now. And in those two-step back moments, you might not feel like you can create this beautiful future for yourself and this beautiful future for the collective. But then when there's days that you do feel that, it's like work with that and hold that energy, because we get to just keep asking right now. We get to just keep coming back to what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And you can hold that frequency, and that projects so much more than the negative heavy frequencies do anyways, right? So when you're in that higher vibrational energy of I want healing, and then I'm holding, this idea for the collective and all of these beautiful things that I desire for myself and for the world, that ripples out way more when we're in that, steps forward place versus sometimes when we're really in the dumps, in the two steps back. And yeah.
And but what if this is the way that I've been seeing it, and I've also had some health issues in the last year or two. And what I recognized for myself is that when I was in the dumps, it was an opportunity for me to call myself back home. And so one exercise that I do, and you don't even have to be in the Akashic records for it. It is something I do in the Akashic records, but it's something I do a lot when I don't feel good. And I literally just put my hands on my heart and I say, I call myself back home. I call myself back home. I give myself permission to call back all of the pieces of me that I've abandoned, knowingly or unknowingly, consciously or unconsciously, across all time, space, dimensions, and realities. I call those pieces back home. And the more that you do that, the more you'll start to feel yourself being more embodied. And that's when your body can heal, right? It's when you're embodied in your own energy that that healing energy can kick in. And a lot of times when we are down in the dumps, it maybe is that you need rest, but also it could be a purge. It's a release of all of that energy that you have maybe absorbed from other people, just from being an empath, or emotions that you haven't digested over the years. And so quite often when you go down in the dumps like that, when you do come out of it, you come out a little bit higher and a little bit more awake than when you went in.
Yeah, especially if you consciously call yourself forward and say, in a conscious way, I bring forward myself into the highest frequency timeline, and I pull myself into, while working with your guides, they'll be like, okay, we got some work to do then, right? And then all of a sudden you're upgrading, your cells are upgrading, and your physical body takes what is perceived as a beating, but really it's a massive upgrading, so that you can be able to walk in that frequency with alignment. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
Powerful.
That being said, though, I do feel like there's a little caveat in there. If you feel like anybody listening that they're going through a medical thing, go see your doctor if you feel like you need to, because sometimes we think we're upgrading and then there's actually like, oh, my iron is actually really, really low.
Well, yeah, and
I do have a medical thing, right?
It can and does manifest physically, which is a real thing in which you really have to have help with. But
and that goes for trauma, energy, things like that. So there is the physical workings with what is happening with your body. And then I love that calling yourself back home. And sometimes that's hard to ask. Sometimes I know for me, like my brain's been in such a fog this week. I haven't been sleeping. Like my normal mental processes, I'm not even thinking about it. My brain's like, what am I going to eat? How do I drink water? And then it's like when I have those little bits of clarity, I'm like, okay, great. Return to our tools to support ourselves. So I totally agree. It's a balance of the physical body, the spiritual body, and the emotional body.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing.
My cats really keep coming in here.
Right? They have something to share. That's so fun. All right. Well, any other comments or things that anyone feels is pertinent to this time, space, reality, dimension? No, we're good.
No, thank you for sharing your knowledge, Cindy. Once again, I appreciate it.
It was fabulous.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys can all find Cindy at Avalon Spirit, as well as in the links below. So check out the links below to find her on Instagram and all the other places. So Cindy, thank you again. This has just been such a treat. It is huge for me, as I know it is for Lisa and Elise. So we really hope all of you watching have really enjoyed this. And we three definitely recommend a session with Cindy. I have had many, we've all had many. There's so much to learn. So we'll leave that with you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.